Can a baby's
Sakin
cry
ol
shift
canım,
the order
üşütmüş
of an
olmalı.
interstellar kingdom?
Ben buradayım,
In a palace
geçecek.
where silence and discipline rule, the approach of an unexpected
Sakin ol
human will
canım,
change
üşütmüş olmalı.
everything and ignite a
Ben
bond
buradayım,
beyond all
geçecek.
rules. The corridors of the alien royal
Sakin
stronghold
ol canım,
stretched in
üşütmüş olmalı.
impossible angles,
Ben buradayım,
glittering with
geçecek.
technology that seemed almost alive, as though the walls themselves were conscious and aware of the steps of those who moved within them. Each panel pulsed with a faint iridescence, veins of energy running beneath the surface like the lifeblood of some colossal creature. Hovering platforms glided silently along unseen rails, and soft hums of machinery created a rhythm that mingled with the occasional distant laughter of court attendants. The air smelled faintly of ozone and sweet mineral, and the shifting lights cast patterns across the floor that made the space feel both enormous and intimate, as if the fortress could fold in on itself at will. Amid this alien elegance, a tension had begun to coil itself through the halls, subtle but insistent, vibrating like the last note of a song hanging in the air. The queen appeared at the far end of a long, arched hallway, her movements measured and graceful, each step echoing softly against the polished surfaces. She had the appearance of a human woman, with skin pale enough to shimmer faintly in the alien light, and hair that flowed silver in long, straight strands, catching the illumination in tiny sparks that made her seem ethereal. But the long ears, sweeping upward with delicate elegance, marked her unmistakably as something otherworldly. They twitched slightly with each ambient sound, picking up tones that a human ear could never discern, giving her a constant awareness of the fortress's rhythm and the whispers of those around her. Despite her regal presence, there was a palpable tension behind her eyes, a flicker of unease as if she could feel that something was about to disturb the careful order of her court. That disturbance arrived abruptly, and in a way no one could have anticipated. The queen's infant, swaddled in a translucent cradle that hovered beside her, erupted in a cry that pierced the corridors like a bell struck too hard. The sound was high and raw, reverberating off walls, bouncing across the floating platforms, and even vibrating the air in ways that made delicate instruments shiver. Guards froze mid-step, hovering drones hovered uncertainly, and the Council of Ministers, usually a rigid and solemn presence, exchanged glances that blended alarm with faint exasperation. The infant's wail was accompanied by tiny, insistent hands flailing in the air, a chaotic symphony that demanded immediate attention. One of the hovering maintenance bots, small, round, and usually devoted to floor polishing, spun itself into a frenzy, twirling in dizzy loops as if trying to flee the noise. Its voice module designed for cheerful announcements squeaked in rising panic. Warning, warning, noise detected, infant disturbance, imminent collapse of floor cleanliness. The sight sent a ripple of chuckles through the tense air, and the queen's usual composure softened just slightly. Even in the midst of crisis, there was room for absurdity, and for a brief moment, the fortress's unnatural elegance seemed less intimidating. The human soldiers positioned near the queen shifted nervously. They had trained for countless scenarios in distant worlds, yet none of their drills had prepared them for soothing the cry of a royal alien infant while surrounded by technology that seemed capable of evaluating their worthiness in real time. The tension was thick enough to touch, and yet somewhere in that pressure, humor found its way through like a stubborn weed. One soldier muttered under his breath, half to himself and half to the nearest alien guard, "I did sign up for interstellar combat, not intergalactic babysitting," drawing a soft, almost incredulous smile from the hovering aides nearby. It was then that a single human stepped forward, moving with a confidence that seemed almost careless in the face of the escalating chaos. He had a calm, easy gait, the kind that suggested he had a joke at the ready for any emergency, and his eyes were steady, watching both the infant and the queen with a mixture of respect and genuine curiosity. He raised his voice just enough to speak clearly over the infant's wails, dryly noting to the nearest hovering drone, "Don't worry, I promise I won't short-circuit your polishing routines." We're just negotiating peace with a tiny overlord here." His comment, delivered with a deadpan grin, seemed to cut through the tension like a knife through silk. The drone beeped in a high-pitched stutter, as if uncertain whether to be offended or amused. Approaching the queen, the human crouched slightly, keeping his movements deliberate and unthreatening. He addressed the infant in soft, careful tones, murmuring words that, while incomprehensible to the surrounding aliens, carried an unmistakable warmth. The baby's cries faltered, curiosity flickering in those wide, observant eyes. There was a moment of stillness where the vastness of the fortress seemed to pause, as though the walls themselves were listening to this interaction, uncertain but intrigued. The queen's ears twitched subtly, catching every nuance, and for the first time her expression revealed something close to genuine surprise. The council watched bemused, as this human soldier performed a delicate balancing act. He leaned slightly to one side, gesturing gently as he spoke, and the infant's flailing limbs slowed. The silver-haired queen's usually imperious gaze softened, and she allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible laugh at one of his whispered, humorous remarks. "You know, in my training manual, infants were supposed to be less volcanic." The comment drew a ripple of quiet amusement through the guards, and even the winged aides hovering nearby tilted their heads in what could almost be interpreted as laughter. The fortress, alive with humming technology, seemed to respond in kind. Lights pulsed in softer rhythms, floating platforms drifted more slowly, and the minor alarms that had begun earlier died down, as if acknowledging that the human's presence had restored a fragile equilibrium. Even the maintenance bot, which had spun itself into dizzy panic, began to hover cautiously around the soldier, its little voice module squeaking a tentative, all systems nominal, infant appeased. Encouraged, the soldier gently reached for the floating cradle, keeping his movements deliberate and careful. The infant, sensing the calm in his voice and the steady gaze, extended tiny hands instinctively, seeking connection. The queen, watching the scene unfold, felt a strange, unexpected warmth, an emotion that had little precedent among her species. She observed how effortlessly this human bridged the gulf between fear and reassurance, how humor, even in a small dose, softened the stark edges of her palace's rigid etiquette. As the baby's cries transformed into coos and soft gurgles, the room seemed to exhale collectively. The council members exchanged glances, some impressed, some baffled, all recognizing the subtle shift in power dynamics that had occurred in mere moments. The queen, holding the now calm infant close, allowed herself a small, amused smile. She realized that this human soldier, this creature she had regarded with caution and distant curiosity, possessed something her most trusted aides often lacked: empathy combined with courage, tempered by wit. Humor continued to weave through the tension like a gentle current. The soldier, noticing a hovering drone eyeing him suspiciously, raised an eyebrow and muttered, "No need to take notes. I'm pretty sure I'll be fired for unsolicited diplomacy anyway." The drone beeped in what might have been an alien approximation of a laugh, and the queen allowed herself another quiet chuckle. The
Sakin ol canım.
fortress, which had
Üşütmüş
seemed
olmalı.
almost oppressively
Ben buradayım.
perfect,
Geçecek.
now felt alive in a new way, responsive not just to orders or protocol, but to something subtler: trust, compassion, and shared levity. By the time the soldier finally stepped back, allowing the queen to cradle her infant without obstruction, the atmosphere had transformed completely. The high-tech corridors no longer radiated only cold efficiency. They hummed with something warmer, a sense that the unexpected and the improbable could create alliances stronger than fear or protocol. The queen's elongated ears twitched in subtle appreciation, her eyes shimmering as she regarded the human with something like awe. Even the other soldiers, initially tense and uncertain, now stood a little taller, recognizing the quiet power of a small, courageous act delivered with calm and humor. The infant, cradled safely, reached a tiny hand toward the human one last time before yawning, signaling the end of the crisis. The queen, A ruler who had faced countless threats across the stars felt a rare flicker of gratitude. This human soldier, unassuming and irreverent, had changed the dynamics of her court not with force or strategy, but with patience, empathy, and a carefully timed joke. In the strange, humming corridors of the fortress, laughter and calm now blended seamlessly with the soft, ethereal lights, marking the beginning of a story that would ripple far beyond this moment, seated in the unlikeliest of places. A baby's cry and a human's quiet courage. The palace of the alien queen, once a realm of precise order and rigid formality, had begun to breathe in a new rhythm. The corridors no longer hummed with a nervous tension, but with a softer, more playful energy, as if the fortress itself recognized the presence of someone who could navigate its pulse without fear. The human soldier, now more comfortable in this strange environment, walked alongside the queen, who held her infant with a careful balance of maternal authority and curiosity. His movements were casual, yet every gesture was deliberate, each step a silent declaration that he could meet the unpredictability of this alien world with both calm and wit. He glanced at the glowing panels lining the hallway, eyes flicking to the displays that charted energy flows, security grids, and floating platforms. "You know," he said quietly to the queen, voice laced with deadpan humor, "in my training, they never mentioned palace corridors that double as mood rings. One wrong step, and I'm apparently a disaster waiting to happen." The queen's ears twitched in mild amusement, and for the first time her lips curved into something close to a grin. Even the hovering maintenance drones seemed to hesitate in their routines, as if curious whether this human might be capable of charm as well as competence. The infant cooed softly, reaching out with tiny fingers that wobbled in midair. The human leaned slightly closer, murmuring words the child could not comprehend but somehow understood, a gentle banter in a language of tone and warmth rather than vocabulary. The baby's eyes, large and reflective like liquid silver, followed his every movement. It was a subtle display of trust, remarkable for a creature so young, and it drew a flicker of surprise from the queen, who had always been meticulous in assessing threats. The bond forming before her eyes defied protocol, defied expectation, and yet it was undeniably real. The palace itself seemed to respond. Lights pulsed in softer patterns, hovering platforms shifted gently to avoid unnecessary contact, and energy conduits hummed a smoother, almost musical cadence. The human soldier's humor, quiet and understated, acted as a conduit between tension and relief. At one point, as they passed a corridor lined with crystal conduits that refracted light in complex fractals, he remarked, "If I trip here, it's not my fault the floor wants to play kaleidoscope with me." The queen snorted softly, a rare sound, and even one of her aides, a small winged alien with iridescent feathers, flapped in amusement, narrowly avoiding a collision with a hovering surveillance orb. As they reached a chamber that served as both nursery and council meeting space,
Sakin
the
ol canım.
human
Üşütmüş
observed the
olmalı.
alien devices
Ben buradayım.
carefully. A
Geçecek.
series of levitating cradles and support fields floated gently above the floor, each designed to monitor the infant's vital signs with precision. Tiny projections traced their pulse rates and respiration in glowing lines that swirled like miniature constellations. The human bent slightly to interact with a cradle's interface, muttering to himself in a mixture of curiosity and self-deprecating humor. "I swear, if my mother ever saw one of these, she'd have tried to bring it home as a kitchen timer." The queen's ears twitched in amusement, and the infant gurgled, responding to the tone rather than the content, a small ripple of recognition that the human soldier's presence was both calming and engaging. The conversation shifted, naturally and slowly, as the queen began to ask questions about his species and his habits, but in a way that was tentative, almost shy. The human soldier responded with candor, using humor to bridge the cultural gap. "We do this thing called coffee," he explained lightly. "It's a bitter, hot liquid that we swear helps with focus, though I suspect it mostly just makes us jittery in polite company." The queen tilted her head, the silver strands of her hair catching the ambient light, and allowed herself a faint chuckle. Her ears flicked toward the ceiling in a subtle acknowledgement, as if to say that this explanation, absurd as it seemed, was entirely comprehensible in its effect. The baby, nestled securely against her chest, squirmed slightly, then settled as the human leaned forward to offer a playful comment about the absurdity of floating cradles. "You've got the most sophisticated nursery I've ever seen," he said, voice low, "and I still can't figure out how to make a baby nap without accidentally triggering an anti-gravity field." The queen's eyes met his, and for the first time she felt a quiet respect, not born of obligation or ceremony, but of recognition that this human could navigate not only the technology but the emotional landscape of her court. Outside the nursery, the corridors shimmered with the subtle activities of palace life. Hovering platforms transported delicacies prepared for alien tastes, while robotic attendants glided smoothly between rooms, delivering messages and maintaining order. The human followed the queen at a measured pace, joking quietly about the complexity of interstellar etiquette. "I'm pretty sure I'm violating at least 36 protocols just by standing here," he whispered, a wry smile on his face. The queen's lips curved in a quiet laugh, and her ears twitched twice, a gentle cadence of approval that did not go unnoticed by him. As they moved deeper into the fortress, a minor commotion erupted near one of the observation decks. A small maintenance drone, caught in the delicate balance of energy conduits, emitted a high-pitched warning signal and spun erratically, narrowly avoiding collision with a hovering console. The human soldier, unflustered, quipped, "Ah, the automated system of doom is back at it again. Don't worry, little guy, I've got your six. Unless you short-circuit on me, then all bets are off." The drone beeped in what could almost have been amusement, circling him cautiously, and the queen's laugh, soft but genuine, rippled through the chamber. By now, the human soldier had become something of an anomaly in the palace. Guards who had initially observed him with suspicion now exchanged quiet, impressed glances. The aides, even those normally quick to criticize, had begun to regard him with something akin to admiration. His humor, his calmness, and his ability to engage the infant without panic had transformed the atmosphere. He moved through the corridors not as an intruder or a subordinate, but as a bridge between worlds, a living testament to the idea that empathy, wit, and courage could wield more influence than rank or protocol. The queen led him to a viewing gallery that overlooked the asteroid cluster surrounding the fortress. Light from distant stars filtered through transparent panels, casting prismatic colors across their faces. The infant cooed, fascinated by the patterns of light, and the human soldier bent slightly, whispering to the child with a playful smile. "See that one? That's the interstellar spaghetti star. Don't worry, it won't stick to your onesie." The queen's laughter was quiet but genuine, and she allowed herself a rare moment of relaxation, leaning slightly against a console while observing the dynamic between human and infant. Their conversation drifted, slow and deliberate, touching on culture, habits, and the peculiarities of their respective species. The queen shared stories of court protocol, absurd yet precise, and the human soldier responded with anecdotes of Earth life, each tinged with humor. At one point, he joked about his attempts to teach his platoon proper etiquette, only to discover that sarcasm was not universally understood, a concept that drew another ripple of laughter from the queen, who tilted her head, ears flicking in amusement. Time seemed to stretch, elongating the moments of connection into something substantial and memorable. The fortress, alive with technology and tradition, had begun to bend subtly around the new rhythm established by humor, empathy, and patience. The infant, once a source of anxiety and disruption, now babbled contentedly, reaching out to the human soldier with gestures that were instinctive yet profound. The queen observed the scene, noting how the presence of one unassuming human could unsettle assumptions, transform interactions, and create bonds that no protocol could prescribe. In the late hours of the alien day, as the asteroid clusters outside shimmered in shifting hues of violet and indigo, the human soldier and the queen sat quietly in the observation gallery. The baby slept in a levitating cradle, its gentle hum of life matched by the soft vibrations of the palace itself. They spoke quietly, often in pauses, sometimes in jokes, letting humor bridge the gap between species and rank. The palace, once a place of rigid hierarchy and silent scrutiny, had begun to breathe, laugh, and respond to the unexpected alliances forming within it. Even the maintenance bots, previously frantic in their devotion to order, had relaxed into a cautious rhythm, following their usual routines with the knowledge that this human soldier, who moved through corridors with humor and calm, had become something of a stabilizing force. The queen's ears twitched once, twice, registering the subtle harmony of palace life restored, and for the first time in many cycles, she felt the quiet, unspoken acknowledgement that sometimes courage and empathy, coupled with humor, could reshape the very dynamics of a world. The fortress hummed with a low, contented rhythm as morning light filtered through the crystalline panels, painting the corridors with streaks of soft violet and gold. The palace no longer felt like a place of tension and protocol, but like a living entity in quiet equilibrium, attuned to the heartbeat of those who moved within it. The queen walked through the halls with a calm she had not known in many cycles, her infant cradled securely in her arms, eyes bright with curiosity and trust. Her long, elegant ears twitched occasionally, catching subtle nuances in the shifting light and sound of the palace, and she allowed herself a small, amused smile as she observed a hovering maintenance bot attempting, once again, to navigate the corridor without bumping into anything. The human soldier followed at a measured pace, moving with ease now through the alien world he had once regarded with wary uncertainty. His posture was relaxed, humor dancing at the edges of his voice, and he carried a quiet confidence born not of rank or combat experience, but of a newfound understanding of empathy, patience, and the subtle power of small gestures. "If I trip again," he murmured, nodding toward a floating platform teetering dangerously close to a conduit, "I'm blaming the Daker. Clearly this palace has a grudge against Earth footwear." The queen chuckled softly, her eyes glimmering with amusement, and the infant cooed in agreement, stretching tiny hands toward him as though recognizing him as a familiar presence. As they reached the central atrium, the energy of the fortress shifted ever so slightly, a sign that the palace itself was
Sakin ol
aware of
canım.
the subtle
Üşütmüş olmalı.
balance between
Ben
chaos and
buradayım.
calm.
Geçecek.
A minor alert blinked on a hovering display. A maintenance drone had begun to spark near one of the energy conduits, an unusual occurrence but not immediately dangerous. The queen's ears twitched sharply, a signal of alertness, but before she could act, the human soldier stepped forward with a calm grin. "Let me guess," he said quietly, glancing at the blinking drone. "We're about to have a light show that isn't part of the royal tour." His dry humor diffused the tension immediately, drawing a soft smile from the queen and a curious tilt of the head from the infant. He approached the drone carefully, eyes scanning the flashing panels as he adjusted the interface. "Easy there, buddy. I'm not here to dismantle you, just to negotiate a truce." The drone beeped nervously, sparks crackling faintly, and the soldier reached into his belt to produce a small multi-tool, moving with deliberate precision. Within moments, he had stabilized the drone's circuitry, causing it to hover with renewed composure. "See," he said to the queen, voice low but playful. "All it took was a bit of calm, some humor, and a promise not to short-circuit its dignity. Works every time." The queen laughed, a sound rare and genuine, and even the aides observing from nearby platforms exchanged quiet murmurs of approval. With the immediate crisis averted, the soldier turned to the queen. "You know," he said, lowering his voice so the infant could not hear, "I thought I signed up for combat, for interstellar chaos, maybe a few near-death experiences, but nothing prepared me for palace politics and baby diplomacy. I think I deserve a medal for surviving the latter." The queen tilted her head, her long ears flicking in amusement, and allowed herself a faint chuckle, feeling the tension of countless cycles release in that shared moment. The infant gurgled, reaching for the soldier with small, deliberate motions, and he bent slightly to engage, whispering playful nonsense that drew another soft laugh from the queen. Over the next hours, the palace seemed to settle into a new rhythm. The human soldier and the queen moved together through chambers and corridors, engaging in light conversation, occasionally broken by the cooing or babbling of the infant. They shared stories, jokes, and quiet observations about their worlds. And in those moments, the boundaries between species, rank, and expectation began to dissolve. The queen's court, once stiff and precise, began to mirror the warmth and humor of these interactions. Guards relaxed in their movements, aides hovered with less rigid attention, and even the maintenance drones adjusted their routines, operating with a subtle flexibility that suggested they were now aware of the delicate harmony unfolding around them. At one point, the queen led the soldier to the observation gallery, where the sprawling asteroid clusters surrounding the fortress glimmered in shifting hues of violet, indigo, and silver. The infant, cradled securely, reached out toward the patterns of light, fascinated by the flickering reflections. The soldier knelt slightly, whispering nonsense phrases, making the child laugh in soft, airy gurgles. The queen watched quietly, her eyes reflecting the distant stars, and realized that the human had not only calmed her infant but had altered the very atmosphere of her court. She felt a profound respect for him, a recognition of the subtle courage and empathy that had reshaped perceptions and relationships within these walls. A message arrived via the palace's internal network, detailing minor system irregularities in other wings. The queen considered ordering a series of inspections, but, seeing the calm and humor radiating from the human, allowed herself to postpone the rigid protocols. "Perhaps some things can wait," she said softly, a trace of amusement in her voice. The soldier grinned. "See, that's my management style, humor, calm, and the occasional miracle. Works on humans and apparently alien royalty too." The queen's laughter, a rare and precious sound, filled the chamber, and the infant echoed with delighted babbles. As the day progressed, the bond between them deepened. The human soldier had begun as an outsider, uncertain and cautious, yet his courage, humor, and patience had allowed him to navigate the alien world with an ease that astonished both the queen and her court. He had learned to read the subtle cues of the fortress, the shifts in energy, the micro-expressions of its inhabitants, and had discovered that even in a world of advanced technology and strict hierarchy, small gestures and gentle humor could hold immense power. By evening, the palace hummed with quiet contentment. The infant, now resting comfortably in a levitating cradle, exhaled in soft sleep, fingers curling around the edge of the soft material. The queen leaned against a console, observing the human soldier as he moved through the chamber, checking minor systems, adjusting floating panels, and exchanging playful remarks with hovering drones. Her ears twitched subtly, a sign of keen attention, and she allowed herself the rarest of feelings, trust without hesitation. The soldier paused, noticing the queen watching him. He offered a small, respectful bow, half in jest, half in acknowledgement of the quiet connection they had forged. "You know," he said, voice low, "I never thought interstellar babysitting would be part of my resume, but I think I'm starting to enjoy the chaos." The queen smiled, ears flicking gently, and replied with a quiet warmth, "You have changed the rhythm of this fortress, human, in ways you cannot yet understand." The final moments of the day were spent in calm observation. The fortress, alive with technology and tradition, had shifted subtly around the presence of one human and his quiet courage. The maintenance bots moved with gentle efficiency, the guards patrolled with relaxed vigilance, and the aides hovered attentively, all responding to the newly established equilibrium. The queen's court had been transformed, not by force or decree, but by empathy, humor, and small, intentional acts of courage. The human soldier, now fully integrated into the rhythm of palace life, had grown beyond the fears and uncertainties that had marked his arrival. He had discovered the profound effect of presence and patience, humor and humanity, and had forged connections that bridged worlds and species. The queen, who had once regarded him with wary curiosity,